more are starting to watch on YouTube. So Mikaela, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about how we can improve our skills.
All right, well, good afternoon. Thank you everybody for joining us here, wherever you are, if you're in your pajamas or if you're at and kind of, yeah, just what the topic says, improving your skills when everything is at a standstill. And I don't know what your season was like of the corona. I don't know what life was like before, but for me, it was kind of, I was entering into kind of what felt like a go, go, go season and new opportunities and lots of trainings. And then maybe like you, it's kind of felt like a full stop. So today we're going to be diving into kind of how we can still make the most of this time. And there's so much uncertainty, and even with talks of things starting to reopen, there's even a sense though of what is that going to look like, and what does that time transition look like. So as we dive in, I'd love for you guys to have this be as interactive as we can. If you've been to one of my trainings before, I like to ask questions and keep you guys thinking. And so today is going to be no different. So feel free to throw questions in the chat box. Amanda and I are going to try and be, monitoring those, and I'll do the best I can to follow those a bit too. So the question is, to start, how are you doing? And maybe that's kind of a dumb, basic question, but if I had to really sit down and have coffee with you, and that sounds wonderful right now, how are you doing in terms of like really, really doing? How are you doing? I was talking to my brother the other day, and I said, he's a financial advisor, so obviously a lot of phone calls he's getting and conversations there, people are stressed. And he said, Mikaela, I'm just making lemonade out of lemons. And there's a sense in this time that, are you making the most of this time? So if you've seen, there's lots of social media posts and different things, and I've seen a couple from leaders of past who have said, in times of crisis, this is the time to make the most of it. Don't waste a crisis, basically. And so my first question I throw out to you guys is, what so far is the biggest takeaway that you've learned in this time? Obviously, it's been a month, 2 months kind of since all of this. And I'm finding on my end, when I'm talking to clients and teams and leaders throughout, that I'm finding, in times of pressure and times of adversity, that's where we really find out kind of what's at the core in terms of our character, our competency. And so I'm seeing that with my clients and leaders. The leaders that, have that foundation in them are kind of rising to the occasion and doing more in terms of engagement and communication with their teams. And the ones that maybe aren't quite have, I would say, a little more growth to do, and we all have growth to do, but growth to do as a leader are kind of, more or less maybe crumbling in this time. And so part of that is identifying, kind of doing that internal dive, because for a lot of you, and for me as well, like I said, it's kind of a full stop. So life looks different. Even though I do feel just as busy as before, life is a little slower. And so it gives us time and space to hopefully have a little more self-reflection of, what's going on with me, and to use this time to really grow yourself personally. And so we spend so much of our time, especially if you're in the sales arena, building relationships, growing team relationships. But now it's a kind of a time I'd encourage you to kind of grow your relationship with you. I heard someone ask one time the question, write down your kind of 5 top best friends. And so, make a list. And the question came back, he said, how many of you guys wrote down yourself, as your best friend? So this is a kind of time to, and that kind of best friend of you, kind of interesting way to think about it. But that first question what is the biggest takeaway you've learned thus far? So think professionally and personally, what are things you've hopefully already learning about yourself that change, adversity, times of big transition, they can teach us a lot about ourselves in that whole, biggest part of leadership is self-awareness. And so this is a great time to be doing that kind of internal dive. So I see, Thomas, you said the importance of utilizing a schedule for family and work. So I think, yes, we're going to talk about that for sure. The importance of keeping a routine, keeping a structure, that is huge, both, especially if you got kids at home, they need structure probably more than any of us. And so diving in here a little bit, I'm going to tap into 3 specific tips that hopefully you can find helpful in this time. And the first tip, just diving into it here, is it's important to define the season. So every season has a purpose. Every season has a significance. And this season is like no other. And I grew up on a farm. I grew up with, my dad's a farmer. So I learned at a young age that there's seasons to life, right? So when it's harvest, I didn't see my dad much. He was in the field. He was go, go, go. But when it was winter, I saw him a lot more because obviously you can't do much when the ground is frozen. And he was using that time though as well to prepare, to kind of review the year, to plan for the next year. And so there's still purpose in that season. So now, a lot of you, like I said, I was kind of in a go, go, go season, and maybe you were too, or maybe life just looked different. And all of a sudden, life looks probably a lot different, and the season looks different, and the kind of time looks different, and that routine and structure looks different for your family, obviously, with kids at home. And regardless, even the seasons that are forced upon us still have a purpose. And so the key is to identify that purpose and to find that significance of that season. So I'm going to go through the kind of 4 seasons, and they're in farming terms, but you can kind of gauge best you can in terms of think about your current day-to-day, what it looks like, and identify, I'd say, both what season you were in previously, and then now what season you're maybe all of a sudden in now, the forced upon season almost. And so, okay, we'll just dive in here. So spring is a time of new beginnings. You're sowing new opportunities. You're kind of looking ahead, looking at the year ahead and opportunities. You're gauging your resources that you need throughout the year. So it's lots of putting seeds in the ground, new opportunities, new beginnings. Summer is a time where you're more tending and taking root to what you've planted. You're maybe engaging deeper with relationships. You're kind of nurturing those. You're monitoring, managing kind of those seeds you've watered or put in the ground. So it's a very much also a waiting time where you're kind of just, trusting what you've kind of put out there. Fall, obviously, harvest is a time where it's go. You're maybe up early, you're up late. There's just a lot to do. You're basically reaping the fruits of your labor. It's a fun time. And then winter, of course, is it can feel like things are dying. So maybe for a lot of us, it can feel like right now it's full stop, we're in winter, where everything's just at a standstill. And even though in winter there's preparations, and this is a time, even in normal cycles with teams, if they feel like they're in winter, this is a time where I say do that internal dive to really work on you, grow your skills, focus on the family, lots of preparations, lots of maybe big picture or strategic planning in that kind of time of winter. So a big part though, once you identify your season, and I'll say really quick, another key part, especially if you're in the sales industry or that kind of service type, is it's also really important to identify not only what season you're in, but what season your clients or potential clients or customers are in. Because, I have friends that right now they're kind of in a winter. They've lost their jobs and life looks really different right now. Then I have friends that they're in industries that it's crazy, and they're in the manufacturing world, and all of a sudden they're basically in harvest. And so it's, even as for me calling on my clients, I have clients right now that they're basically in winter, but they're wanting to do more trainings online. So I'm engaging with them a lot more. The other ones, manufacturing clients, I'm, letting them be a little bit because they're still essential business. They're go, go, go. And it's kind of just making sure everything's at bay there. So I'm sensitive to what season and having that empathy and understanding with the people around me as well. So there's kind of identifying the season, but then a big part of the season too is your mindset, because a different season requires a different mindset. And this is, I think, where people can get depressed, get anxiety, get caught up because they have just gone, take personal example. I was go, go, go. I was excited about new opportunities. My mindset was, grab the bull by the horns and let's go. And there was excitement and a mindset every day filled with a lot of purpose, right? Full stop. My mindset now drastically has to change to what is the purpose of this season? What does my days look like? And so that routine, that schedule, all of a sudden looks a lot different. And so to understand, okay, what season am I in? And then also with that, what mindset is now needed in this time? Because as we know, mindset produces attitude, produces behavior, produces results. So if you're finding your results, your behavior, your performance right now is struggling, your motivation is struggling, I would go back to your mindset to tap into, and we'll dig into this and some of the other tips a bit more, dig into your mindset a bit of how can I change that? How can I adjust that so that it helps my days a little bit more? So the question I would give you for that to ponder, to think on is twofold. Identify your season, maybe identify some of your clients' season, how you can meet them in that. And maybe, even some of my clients, they're in kind of a slow season. So I sent them some of my favorite leadership books, things that I can keep doing to add value, but meet them in their season. And then, of course, what is the mindset that you need to kind of tap into to really pull out the purpose of this season? So any thoughts, questions with that, feel free to throw it in the chat box, and I'll give us a second here before we move to the next one. All right, looks like you're quiet. You're quiet out there. It's the afternoon lull. Everybody, I got my coffee. Everybody needs to get their coffee. I find I'm drinking a lot more coffee these days. I don't know about you guys, but which isn't good because I think I only have one roll of toilet paper left. So if anyone wants to gift me with toilet paper, I am that person now that is in need of toilet paper. I lucked out and did a shop right before all of this started, but now I'm out one roll. So pray for me. But all right, so tip number 2 is let solitude be your strength. Now, I know some of you are saying, Amanda, she's got 2 kids at home. She's saying solitude. I got 2 kids at home. There's nothing like solitude going on for me now. But I would say whether it's solitude or whether it's a bit of a slowdown or life looks different in that sense, find your strength in this time. And kind of the focus here is to tap into growing your emotional intelligence, because right now, change, adversity, uncertainty brings so many emotions to the surface. I had a client just the other day to me say, Mikaela, it's not that. I think most of us can, when there's a problem or when there's issue, most of us can dive in, tackle the issue, the challenge, and go for it all together. But, he said there's the uncertainty is what brings most of the anxiety. How long is this going to last? What does the reopening look like? What does it look like for my business? If I've lost my job, my wife has lost my job, there's so much uncertainty, and that can bring up in us fears and stress and all sorts of emotions, if you will. And that is, use this as your opportunity to grow your emotional intelligence, because really that's what that is. When I talk about the leaders that I see rising to the occasion, it's the ones that have been able to grab onto the stresses that we're all feeling, acknowledge them, work through them in a healthy way, communicate them with each other, and then get a game plan forward. And so with this, I'm going to dive into 4 questions that can help you to think about, where is my emotional intelligence at? Because it really is, studies show it's a muscle in our brain that we can grow. And so might as well take the opportunity to do that. So 4 questions to think through. The first is, how are you managing your stress? So I heard a quote recently. It said, I know where my stress comes from. Where does my peace comes from? And that reality of there's stress all around us. Have I identified what causes me the greatest stress? Is it having the news on 24/7? Is it the scroll on Facebook? I have a friend that she's like, I'm off Facebook, I'm done. And so how are you managing your stress? And do you have healthy ways to manage that stress? Is it physical activity? Is it journaling? But how are you dealing in a healthy, good way with all the emotions that might be coming up for you in this time? I had a leader say, he's CEO of a big business startup and relies heavily on in-person meetings. And he said the biggest thing he's learning is, I can't control. There's so much I can't control, and he's learning to let go. He's learning to deal with all the anxiety that comes up and understanding, what in reality is, even before, I had a false sense of control, basically, is what he's saying. So he was saying, if anything, this is helpful for me to gauge all the more the things that actually are in my control and let go of the things that aren't. So second question with this is, how are you tending to your relationships? So obviously connection is so important for us. And for a lot of people, obviously connection looks a lot different right now. It's not as much, but yet equally, we don't have the physical connection, but just as important right now is maintaining emotional connection with people. So find those routines, those structures where you have that, I would say, more emotional connection. So I was talking with a leader and he's like, I don't know what communication should look like in this time. And I said, even if you get on a call and all you do is talk about how everybody's doing and you connect at that emotional level, good, right? People sometimes just need space to say, especially if it's a dad or, leader of a family, he maybe doesn't feel, he can't always just vent to his family, but maybe needs that space to do that to a safe place at work or something. So, even my 10-year-old niece actually is being the instigator of this for our family. Every couple of days, she texts us all and says, hey, Zoom call, here we go. And she's better at Zoom than I am. I don't know how fast she sends these links, but it's amazing. Which, again, a side note, just amazing how I do a lot of trainings on generational differences and how to work well with each other. And it's interesting me thinking about that generation. She's 10 years old, growing up in a time where Zoom or video with family, that connection, she's doing it with her friends, they're dancing together. It's such a different world. It'll be interesting to see that dynamic in that generation. Anyway, side note. So third question, how are you growing your skills and abilities? So if you do have a little extra time or space, or you have a little maybe extra capacity to dive in, I would highly recommend. I'm partnered with a personality assessment company. So 7 different assessments you can choose from to learn about yourself and work on your skills. I have a friend who's a business owner. She's like, Mikaela, I'm busier than ever, but yet she's taking time to learn guitar because she's sad she let that go at some point. So take advantage of the time you do have to dive into those things you maybe don't have time previously to do. So number 4 is, how are you maintaining your physical health? And kind of goes back to stress. But you know, I'm used to working at home, but I'm also kind of not used to working at home this much. So I'll literally, some days, if I wake up one of the days and I'm like, okay, it's Groundhog Day again, here we go again, I literally that day put a timer on my phone for every 2 hours. That's like a signal for me to go take a lap, take a quick, even 10-minute walk, just to mix it up a bit. So physical health is huge in this time. And so I'd say the biggest thing with all of this is finding your routines and finding your structure. So what are those routines you need to set? What's the structure you need? Way too many of these video calls, my throat is shot. But we actually thrive when there's structure. And so when there's kind of chaos going on or uncertainty going on, what actually helps our brain function at a higher capacity is a structure. And so whatever that looks like in this season, I had a call the other day of someone working from home, and she said, Mikaela, you're my only call of the day, but I literally got ready and put on makeup for you. And I was like, I bet you look beautiful. So any sort of that normal routine helps our focus, helps our purpose, and kind of drives our day. So with that kind of action step, I would say with that emotional intelligence is find time, scheduled time throughout your week that you can put in self-reflective time where you're engaging with the emotions, the stressors. You journal it out, you call a friend, whatever you need to do to kind of work on that emotional intelligence, go through those questions, whatever it might be. So any kind of thoughts, questions with that, anything anyone's done really well that's been helpful, feel free to type it in. No, still crickets out there. Come on, everybody. I'm isolated over here. All right, well, we'll keep rolling. There's a lot more we could get into, but Lynn Ford says online classes. Oh, I would think in terms of engage, in terms of growing your skills, maybe online classes would be a great thing. I'm right now listening to a lot of my favorite mentors and coaches out there because they're putting out videos like crazy. So that's a good one for sure. And Thomas says, yeah, I think you hit it on the head with the structure. And it is a big part. I've read some studies about psychologically, whenever there's chaos, what helps the brain come to a sense of normalcy or ability to kind of function at a higher capacity. One of those things is structure. Another one of those things is connection. So making sure you're getting that connection with each other. So yeah. All right, so we'll keep rolling. So tip number 3 is sustain your focus to raise your standard. So I know a lot of people in this time, it can feel like, kind of a good example of this. I was talking with a leader yesterday. I'm having a lot of phone calls, if you can't tell, talking with a leader. And I was struggling because I was asking him kind of our typical questions of what are your key priorities? Where's your focus? Where are your distractions? All these sort of kind of engagement questions. And he basically said, one word answers, and it kept coming back to, Mikaela, I'm just trying to keep my people safe. He's a leader in a production company, and he leads about 20 people, and he's just worried, if one person gets sick, that's, shut down, and huge for manufacturing to shut down. And so basically saying, I'm just in survival mode. And I think in some seasons, and you might be in that season, and that's okay. I think there's seasons where you're just trying to do the basics where you can eventually get ahead. And a key part of all of this, I would say, is sustaining your focus for once you've identified what season you're in, the mindset. Now it's kind of like, okay, where does my focus go? It's kind of like the funnel. You have the big picture, and now we've pinpointed where your focus should be. And Bill Johnson, he says a quote that says, the key to great purpose or great destruction lies in where we choose to sustain our focus. And I know in this time, there can be days when I feel like I'm all over the place. What day it is it the afternoon? Is it the morning? There's just a sense of so much that uncertainty. What does routine look like? What does my focus look like? And different levels of activity require different, different seasons require different levels of activity. So kind of flowing together again. When you're in a different season, when life looks different, it requires different levels of activity. And so my to-do list looks a lot different right now. My amount of my to-do list looks a lot different because, I was saying to a friend this morning, I said, it's funny, I feel just as busy, but yet I have a little more time to work on some extra projects I haven't been able to get to. But I was saying, I realized I feel like I felt last Thursday, which was kind of emotionally and mentally drained, if I'm just being honest, because I said, I realize it's a different level. The work I'm doing now, it looks a little different. And so it requires a different capacity of my mental and emotional energy. And so I knowing that now a little more, I'm giving myself a little more grace to know, okay, it's okay. My focus looks a little different. It's okay that my to-do list looks different. And maybe I don't get as much done as, certain days because maybe I'm spending more time with individuals on the phone who are struggling and whatnot. And so to understand, again, it's a different season, different activity. And a big part of this as well is removing distractions. So neuroscientists say that when the brain functions at its highest capacity, three things have to happen. The first is a focus on what it should give attention to, the focus, the purpose, what season you're in. The second is inhibiting distractions. And so this is a big one, I would say right now, because we're working at home and maybe, I could have news on 24/7, which wouldn't do me any good. There's things at home, laundry I could be doing. The house always should be cleaner than it is. I can feel like that. And kids at home. So there's lots of more potential distractions. Even this morning, I was on the phone with someone and they said, I started working from home and now I'm back at the office because there's just too many distractions. And so the key then is to get crazy diligent focus on what are those things that are sucking my energy mentally, emotionally, or otherwise that I need to just remove those. Maybe get off Facebook, maybe I know people that only check the news morning, noon, and night because really not much changes in the day. It's just kind of regurgitating what's already been said. And so what are those distractions? The third thing that allows your brain to operate at highest capacity is to have a working flow of going back to what's the key priorities. So it's, every day when you wake up, readdressing what are those key priorities, top priorities, where does my focus need to be, and kind of realigning yourself to those, and then getting crazy resilient at removing distractions. So a key part of this kind of focus is I'm going to give you, again, 4 questions because, you know, I love questions to think about in this time of your focus, the season, maybe the team, maybe your family. These could relate to your family as well. So question number 1 is, what lessons have you learned from these last weeks? Kind of going back to that first question. What's your biggest takeaway? What are the things that you want to grab a hold of in this time? The second thing is, what about your communication works right now and doesn't work? And this, I would say, is huge, especially if you're a leader of a team, you're on a team, you have people under you, even your family unit, because communication right now looks a lot different. And I'm seeing this with teams especially. You know, the one thing about the daily task briefings with the White House is they give a sense of structure. They give a sense of kind of, okay, I know information, because in a time when there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of kind of what's happening, over communicating to your team, your family, whoever, is huge. It's creating, again, that structure and places of consistency and a sense of control when maybe there isn't in a lot of other places. So how is your communication? How are you doing connecting with your team? How are you doing checking in? That is so, so important in this time. And I think I'm seeing how teams execute and communicate in this time are going to so overflow for the good or the bad, moving ahead, you know, whatever this transition looks like. Number 3 is, what strategies do I need to put in place for future success? So this is key, especially if you have your own business. You know, obviously I've even heard companies that have said, man, I kind of really like this staying at home. If I don't have to travel as much, and companies are maybe getting used to not spending so much on travel, the video conferencing is maybe more of the way future. So there's a lot of things that could definitely change that you want to grab a hold of in this time and tap into, that are going to probably be strategic for when you move out of it. So things to be thinking about for sure. And then lastly, I would say, what are you learning about your teammates in this time? What are you learning about your leader, your boss? What are you learning about your family and how they handle change? Even your kids, maybe you're not fazed by all of this and one of them is really struggling. So there's things that you can learn that's essential to working better together, more efficient, more effective, having a sense of empathy and understanding for each other. All of that is huge in this time. I talked to someone yesterday too, and they said, honestly, how this is going with our company and what's happening and all the change and how they're handling it is telling more than anything before. And so they were starting to work on their resume and get, you know, not too many people are hiring right now, but she's thinking, this isn't where I want to be long term. And so, you know, some food for thought in terms of gauging how your team, your company, your leader is handling this in this time. Because often, you know, how you walk out of one season determines how you enter the next. So even though this is a short season, hopefully, potentially, or, you know, whatever it looks like, it probably is going to give you momentum to be able to shift a bit when the shifting starts to happen. So again, kind of grab on to the purpose for you, your family, your team in this time. So yeah, any questions, any thoughts? I'm gonna see some coming through here. So I think I can share this with Thomas, who says, I've learned that being anal is paying off. I've always been big on structure. I have 6 kids, bless you. Clear communication is important, especially with kids, explaining why it's important to kids so they can see the big picture. Yes. Man, that's so true. I was listening to one of my mentors kind of from afar that I watch and follow, and he was talking about how it's been so helpful for him remembering his grandpa talking to him. I think it was maybe some of the 9/11 stuff that happened, and then even some of the stuff prior to that, World War II. I want to say, but remembers him, how helpful it was when he engaged him in that conversation, and now he's having to do it with his teenagers. So I think that's a great comment, Thomas, to really be engaging with your kids in that. I've learned I can do my job from home. I can go to the office when I need to. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm finding a lot of people are enjoying the office occasionally and enjoying the home atmosphere a lot more, getting used to it. You say, moving forward, I need to continue a more focused conversation with the kids. Yeah, I think I would say just across the board, I'd encourage that, because what I always say with leadership is influence. We know that, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's your company, you have influence. And the key to great leaders is that intentionality, is that focus with the time that you have, the meetings that you do have, to be highly intentional with that time, which is really just what we're talking about here. How can you make the most of this time when life looks different and maybe it's hard in a lot of different ways, but how can I still be intentional with this time and influencing maybe me more than ever? Because a big part of the self-awareness of a leader is not only being intentional about the influence you have with other people, but being intentional about your influence, right? How are you investing in you? And I would say that's the big kind of chunk of what we're going after here, is in this time, maybe when things are a little slower or look a little different, to take advantage and kind of pour that investment into you. So yeah, keep the questions coming, or thoughts. I'd love to kind of hear from everybody out there. If not, I can give you one more kind of exercise to do. Not physical exercise. I'm not an athletic trainer, but I can point you to a good gym. If you need one, let me know. So an exercise I'd encourage you to do, if you kind of tapping again back into that emotional intelligence, is if you feel like kind of moments where you feel anxious, where you feel just the uncertainty, the worries, the fears, the doubts are kind of overtaking you a bit. An exercise you can do is write down everything that's out of your control. I mean, just everything, from the things that, when I'm going to get my stimulus check, to things at work, what if I can get toilet paper when I go to the store today, all those things that are out of your control. Write those down on one side of your paper. And then I'll set the timer for like 5 to 10 minutes and allow yourself, again, I'm giving you permission to just worry yourself with all of them. So obviously not so you have a major panic attack or anything, but just give yourself permission to worry about them, to stress about them for 5-10 minutes. Just, let it all out. And then on the end of that, make your list of all the things that are in your control. Because so often what I see too is, especially with men, is they haven't given themselves permission to fully just express their anger, their anxiety, you've seen maybe articles out there of grief. It is a time of grief because you've, in either a small or a big way, there's loss happening. And so to engage with those emotions, to let yourself fully feel them to whatever extent is healthy and necessary, And then when you talk about too, your focus, where to sustain your focus is to dive into that list of those things you can control. Your attitude, your intentionality with your kids, your schedule, your routine, and dive fully into those things. I was reading an article recently where I was talking about the kind of Silicon Valley CEOs and how some of them attributed their success to being so resilient on controlling only the controllables, and everything else just not giving it the time, the energy, the attention, and fully focusing on those things on your control list. And maybe even every day, that's what you need to do, is wake up and say, this is what I control. I can control how much I can exercise, how much I can, love on my kids and play with them, or whatever it might be. But that's kind of a practical thing that's kind of helpful too with those things. So, okay. Sandra said, I had the pleasure in my first video doctor's appointment today. That was amazing. So shows you a little taste of maybe more of what's to come and what we can expect, and just that difference of, Sandra, I'm curious what you found amazing about it, if you liked it, or what about, I guess, you liked about it. I'm curious if you want to share with us. Because for me, the video aspect, I have kind of always disliked all things videos. And so, but yet right now that's becoming my kind of way of life, is phone calls and videos. And I'm having to persevere and press through. And I can't gauge body language and if you're tracking or if I'm in left field for some people. So I'm having to, it's definitely challenging me, and I'm learning a lot about myself. So any other kind of questions, thoughts out there, things that you're finding in the season, how to make the most of the season, how to tap into your purpose in the season? I'm curious what people are finding for what season they're in, and what even just significance. I know for me, a big part of this season is I am having time and space to work on, I've been wanting to do some writing projects, so a little more time and space to dive into those. And so to be okay with, man, I was excited for what was coming, and then full stop, and now to be still excited about the time I have now to tap into some of these projects. So Sandra says, I loved it. It was private, no scary waiting room. Yeah, not being around other sick people or anything either. I could show him where your problems were. He could call my scripts into the pharmacy. Yeah, I mean, it sounds a lot easier. Which I think more and more, that's going to be the way forward, probably for a lot of different industries. It makes sense. It's easy. You're not risking sick, and if you can do it via technology, it's kind of the way forward. So it makes sense. Same with online. I was doing online grocery before this, but now if I never have to go in a grocery store again, I'm fine with that, unless I have to go searching for toilet paper. I don't know, but yeah, definitely lots of new normals and things looking a new way. So I don't want to keep just rambling and talking. So if there are any other questions or thoughts or comments, feel free to throw those out. Otherwise, kind of go from there. How about Amanda? Anything else on your end you're seeing, or on YouTube?
I'm not seeing any questions, no. You had a lot of good prompts and questions that we could ask ourselves. Is there anywhere that we can find that on your website, or do you want to send it to me? I can email it out to those attendees.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I'll shoot you an email with the questions and with maybe some other resources, because I think that emotional intelligence thing is a great thing right now to dig into. There's some videos I can send people, some more information. I can send people to a link to some personality assessments if you want to dive into kind of getting to know yourself a little bit more. Can give you options for those. So yeah, I'll email those to you, and you can send them out, and I can maybe put them on a link to, or anybody can always email me too at releasingyourvoice@gmail.com. So yeah, thank you, Nancy and Lynn and Johnny, for your comments. So thanks for having me, and onward we go.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mikaela. That was really helpful, and we'll definitely look out for just those questions, and I'll include your email in that email out to everybody. That way, if they want to reach out to you and get to know more and get some additional help, they know how to find you then.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys.